Welcome to today's deep dive. Pull up a chair, make yourself comfortable. We are so glad you are here at the table with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Grab a seat because we have a really fascinating topic today.
We really do, because today we are diving into a world that, honestly governs so much of corporate life, but it's largely invisible to the rest of us.
Right, the invisible machinery.
Exactly. We are looking at the people who protect multi-billion-dollar corporations from, catastrophic legal ruin, the people standing between a company and massive federal indictments.
And surprisingly, the way those people are trained is, well, it's not always what you'd expect.
Not at all. Today we are cracking open the actual curriculum, the official syllabus, and the enrollment details for the ICA Certificate in Compliance Level 2 Introductory.
A very specific, very influential piece of paper.
Right. And our mission for this deep dive, for you sitting right here with us, is to extract exactly how the corporate world trains its rule followers and its enforcers from the ground up.
Which is incredibly useful for anyone to know, whether you are prepping for a business meeting, managing a team, or just, insanely curious about how companies wire themselves to avoid disaster.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's unpack this. Because looking through the course syllabus for this ICA certificate, the stated aim of the course caught me entirely off guard.
Oh, how's that?
Well, if you asked 100 people on the street what an introductory compliance course teaches, 99 of them would say it's just a giant, boring checklist.
Right, a list of do this and don't do that.
Exactly, a purely mechanical rule book. But the curriculum here explicitly states that it aims to introduce regulation by exploring, and this is quote, how we got where we are and why regulation is needed.
Yeah. What's fascinating here is that deliberate choice to lead with history and philosophy.
Right.
They aren't just handing these students a static map of today's laws. They are actively forcing them to look backward at the evolution of the regulatory environment itself.
I have to be honest, though, that feels completely counterintuitive. Maybe even a little self-indulgent for a really fast-paced corporate job.
You think it's a waste of time?
Well, think about it. If I am a bank executive, I don't want my new compliance officer waxing philosophical about the regulatory fallout of the 1929 stock market crash.
Fair point.
I want them to tell me if the new financial product we are launching tomorrow is going to get us sued. So, it's like learning the rules of a massively complex board game. If someone just memorizes the rule book, does that actually make them good at compliance? Or is understanding the history, but why the only way to survive the game?
It is absolutely the only way to survive.
Yeah.
Because if you don't understand the origin of a rule,
Yeah.
you cannot possibly anticipate how it applies to an unprecedented situation.
Okay, so it's about anticipating the unknown.
Exactly. Think about the landscape today. Companies are dealing with AI data scraping, decentralized finance, algorithmic bias.
Things that literal rule books haven't fully caught up to yet.
Precisely. Regulations are almost always retroactive. They are written in response to past failures, past crashes, past scandals.
So they're trying to teach a mindset, not just a list.
Right. By teaching aspiring compliance workers and risk function employees the history of these rules, you are actually trying to instill a framework for critical thinking.
That makes sense.
You're teaching them to spot the ambient conditions that historically necessitate a rule. You don't want them just blindly enforcing a checklist against a scenario that might not fit neatly into a box.
So it's the difference between memorizing the symptoms of a disease versus understanding how the virus actually mutates.
That is a perfect analogy. The memorizer fails the moment the virus changes.
Wow.
But the person who understands the foundational architecture of the regulatory environment can look at a brand new tech deployment and say, well, the rule book doesn't mention this specific technology yet, but based on the history of why we regulate consumer privacy, this is going to trigger an audit.
Right. And looking at the target audience for this framework, it's surprisingly broad. The materials note that this course is for anyone wanting to learn more about compliance, but it specifically calls out those in risk functions and regulatory representatives.
It's casting a wide net.
Yeah, and completing it gives you 20 ICA CPD hours, that's continuing professional development, and a Cert Comp designation. It really feels like they are trying to standardize this philosophical approach across the whole corporate ecosystem.
They are. It's a signal to the labor market that you possess this specific, historically grounded approach to risk.
Okay, but here's where the illusion breaks for me a little bit.
Oh.
We're talking about deep, critical analysis of corporate risk, the philosophy of regulation adapting to unprecedented market mutations, all this high-level stuff.
Right.
But looking at the actual structural reality of the learner's journey here, this entire thing is assessed by a single 1 hour online multiple choice exam.
Ah,
You
good.
can take it at any point. You get immediate results and a downloadable certificate. I mean, I have to push back hard on this.
Go ahead.
Can a simple 1 hour multiple choice exam truly measure someone's ability to navigate complex, real world regulatory gray areas? This feels almost like a racket.
It's a very valid criticism.
Right? They charge you for the materials. They let you pace yourself over 4 weeks to 2 months. You have access for up to 2 months, and then they just test you with A, B, C, or D.
It sounds like compliance theater.
Exactly. Doing things simply to prove to regulators that a training box was checked. You could just skim the PDFs, guess your way through the multiple choice questions, and stick the CertComp designation on your LinkedIn profile without absorbing a single ounce of that critical thinking.
You could, absolutely. But if we dig into the source material, specifically the feedback and testimonials from past students, a very different picture emerges about where the actual value of this course is located.
Okay, what are the students saying?
Well, the learning isn't really happening in that exam. The exam is just the administrative gatekeeper. The true value lies in the practical application embedded within the curriculum itself.
So the meat is in the coursework, not the test.
Exactly. Past students specifically highlight the integration of real-life events.
Yeah.
They praise the case studies and the videos at the end of each unit to summarize the information.
Okay, so the multiple choice test is just the bureaucratic receipt, but the case studies are the actual product they are buying.
Precisely. I mean, adult learners in a corporate environment rarely retain abstract theories.
Right, they need a story.
Exactly, they retain narratives. They remember the case study of a specific mid-level manager who accidentally committed wire fraud because they didn't understand the implications of an email.
Wow, yeah, that sticks with you.
Anchoring the historical philosophy to a real-world scenario where things went terribly wrong. That is how you actually change behavior on a Monday morning.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. One of the most telling testimonials in the material comes from a past student who explicitly stated, let me find it. Yeah. This course has helped me understand the importance of the compliance department within an organization, even helping me to better understand certain tasks within my own department.
That is a huge takeaway,
And that student wasn't even in the core compliance team.
which is incredibly revealing about the hidden function of this certification. It acts as an organizational bridge.
How do you mean?
In most companies, the compliance department is heavily siloed. They are viewed as the Department of No.
Oh, totally. They are the corporate police, and nobody likes getting pulled over.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They are the friction that slows down sales, or the roadblock that annoys the marketing team. But when an employee from outside that silo takes this introductory course, it demystifies the function.
It makes them human.
Yes. It transforms the compliance team from arbitrary rule enforcers into a vital organ of the business that the rest of the company can actually comprehend and collaborate with.
That makes a lot of sense.
Because knowledge in this space is practically useless if it's only hoarded by the chief risk officer. It has to be dispersed throughout the company.
Okay, so standardizing that mindset and breaking down those silos across a single company is one thing, but doing it on a global scale is a highly lucrative business model.
It certainly is.
Let's talk about the gatekeeping and the financial engine driving this, because the costs and the institutional backing here are fascinating.
Yeah, let's get into the numbers.
The materials state that this certification is awarded in association with Alliance Manchester Business School at the University of Manchester.
Right, a heavy-hitting traditional academic institution lending its prestige to validate this corporate training.
Exactly. And it definitely charges a premium for that prestige. The course fees vary depending on your currency and location, but we are looking at 730 British pounds, 803 euros, or 949 US dollars.
It's not cheap.
No, but wait, the initial fee is just the cover charge?
Right, there's a catch.
A big one. If you are not an existing ICA member, a fee for a mandatory 12-month membership is automatically added to your basket at checkout.
Mandatory.
Mandatory. That adds roughly another 185 pounds, 204 euros, or 241 US dollars to the total. I mean, they do mention group booking discounts exist, but that mandatory membership is a highly specific, hardwired hurdle.
It completely changes the economic relationship between the student and the institution.
Yes. It's like the difference between hiring a personal trainer for a single afternoon to check your form versus being legally required to sign a 12-month gym contract just to get that initial lesson.
That is exactly what it is. It transforms the purchase from a one-time educational transaction into an ongoing subscription model.
The base course fee, that $1,000 or so, gets you the history, the case studies, and then the 1-hour multiple choice test. But that mandatory ICA membership fee drops you directly into their ongoing fitness regimen.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, this mandatory membership structure points to a profound shift in how corporate risk is managed globally today.
What do you mean? What does that membership actually unlock for the user?
The source text tells us it grants entry into an international community of over 30,000 members.
30,000. Wow.
Plus, it gives you access to a uniquely personalized ICA learning hub and, crucially, weekly webinars covering the latest industry developments. They also mention various discounts, but the network is the real product.
30,000 members globally. I mean, that is a massive hidden intelligence network.
It really is.
When you frame it like that, it makes the initial curriculum seem like just a basic initiation ritual. They don't just want you to have a certificate, they want you plugged into the matrix.
Right. The weekly webinars are your continuous compliance workout to ensure your critical thinking doesn't atrophy.
Because things change so fast.
Exactly. A static education is a huge liability in compliance. If a new sanction drops on a Tuesday, or a new piece of international data legislation is passed on a Thursday, a textbook printed last year is instantly obsolete.
Oh, completely useless.
But a network of 30,000 practitioners talking on a centralized hub, attending weekly update webinars, that is a living, breathing risk mitigation organism. Business compliance is no longer this localized, isolated job where you sit in a basement with a dusty rule book.
It's a highly networked, globalized profession where sharing information across borders is essential.
Absolutely.
Which brings us to the global reach of this specific course. And this is where I think the friction of reality really hits the standardized model.
Oh, the localization efforts.
Yes. The materials explicitly note that the course is available in Arabic, and they have a dedicated portal for enrollments in Malaysia.
Right.
They are clearly exporting this Manchester-validated standard across major cultural boundaries. But the South Korean offering is what really caught my attention.
The South Korean localization is a perfect case study in the limits of pure standardization.
It really is. The materials say, and I'll quote it, "We are delighted to offer the ICA certificate in compliance in Korean and the opportunity to attend an exclusive one-off virtual classroom with a subject matter expert."
An exclusive virtual classroom.
Right. To book it, you literally have to select South Korea as your specific location. Now, why would the Korean version offer an exclusive live virtual classroom with a subject matter expert, while the standard global version relies entirely on self-paced reading and a multiple choice test?
Well, it is a tacit admission by the institution that literal translation is not the same as cultural translation.
Oh, okay.
The core principles of compliance, the history and the philosophy of regulation we discussed earlier, those might be universal in theory.
Sure.
But the actual application of those principles on the ground requires navigating deeply entrenched, localized ways of doing business.
Meaning, what constitutes a conflict of interest in a Western Anglo-American corporate structure might look completely different in an Eastern business culture.
Exactly. A culture that might heavily prioritize relationship building, familial networks, or massive corporate conglomerates. You were talking about fundamentally different societal structures.
So exporting a Western regulatory framework to South Korea or the Middle East without acknowledging those cultural realities is just a recipe for failure.
It wouldn't work at all.
Hmm.
Having a subject matter expert run a live virtual classroom implies that navigating the intersection of global ICA standards and local Korean business practices requires real-time, interactive human guidance.
Right. A self-paced PDF module cannot answer a student's nuanced question about how to apply a Manchester-designed bribery framework to, say, a culturally expected business dinner in Seoul.
Exactly. It acknowledges that the dense fog of regulation looks drastically different depending on what side of the world you're operating in.
But the ultimate goal of the ICA seems to be getting everyone, regardless of geography, using the exact same basic navigation tools.
Yes, the same underlying foundation.
Whether you are in the UK or studying in Arabic in the Middle East or sitting in a live virtual class in South Korea, you are all paying that mandatory membership.
You are all part of that 30,000 member network.
You are all earning the same 20 CPD hours and holding the exact same Cert Comp designation.
It is the literal industrialization of risk management. They are attempting to engineer a shared, universal language for a profession that desperately needs to communicate across borders.
So, what does this all mean? Why does this deep dive matter to you, the listener, navigating your own career right now?
It's a great question.
I mean, even if you never plan on spending $1,000 to take a compliance course, understanding how the corporate world trains its risk managers gives you a massive hidden advantage.
It really does. It entirely changes the lens through which you view corporate decision-making.
Right. When you see your company or a vendor you are partnering with or a startup you are investing in making a seemingly bizarre, overly cautious decision, you now understand the machinery operating behind the curtain.
You know, they aren't just making arbitrary rules to be difficult.
Exactly. You know that their risk managers have been trained, standardized, really, to look at the historical context of regulation. They've studied the case studies where things went disastrously wrong.
And they're operating within a global network of tens of thousands of peers, constantly updating their threat assessments.
They are actively trying to navigate an increasingly hostile regulatory environment so the company doesn't crash and burn.
Understanding that framework, the reliance on historical context, the vital importance of cross-departmental communication, and the deeply networked nature of the profession, it takes the mystery out of corporate behavior.
It allows you to anticipate the friction before it hits your desk. It gives you the blueprint of the fortress.
But as we've seen, that blueprint is currently being stretched across the entire globe, which leaves us in a really interesting place.
It really does.
It leaves us with a rather profound tension to consider moving forward. We are watching introductory compliance training become a highly standardized, borderless export, taught from Manchester to South Korea to the Middle East.
Right.
So the question you have to mull over is this. As this industrialized training expands, will we eventually see the emergence of a singular universal corporate regulatory culture? Or will local, deeply ingrained cultural nuances always inherently clash with these global standards?